What's up, everybody, and welcome to One Man's Opinion. And today we're talking about Spider-Man No Way Home. I will be talking about spoilers today. As a matter of fact, we're going to be getting into spoilers very, very quick. There's a lot of this movie I want to talk about. There are things that I'm gonna finish recording this video, and then 5 minutes later I'll be like, oh, I forgot to talk about this, because there was so much in this movie that I want to talk about, and I'm just trying to go through it in my head and make sure I remember all the small things. There's no way I'm going to be able to remember everything that I wanted to talk about. As I was sitting in the movie theater and I was watching this movie, and all the things that were just coming to me as I'm watching the film, I'm like, I should have brought a pen and a pad or something, because there's so much here. So if you haven't seen it and you care about spoilers, you need to go away, because I'm going to talk about a lot of stuff. A lot of it you've seen on the trailers, but there's a lot of stuff in this movie you have not seen in the trailers. There's a lot of stuff that, if you've been paying attention, even if you didn't see it in the trailers, you probably could guess that's in the movie. But then there's other stuff that you don't know is happening, I promise. And so we're gonna get right into this. We're gonna try to talk about every little bit that I can remember, and I'll let you go what I thought about the movie. So starting out right at the beginning of the film, and this is just the way that I'm gonna have to go through this to try to remember everything, is I'm just gonna kind of go beat for beat through the movie. Basically, what happens in this film, Spider-Man needs everyone to forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, because it's affecting his life in a negative way. People are throwing bricks through Aunt May's window. Some people believe Mysterio, some people don't, but still the crowd that is very against Spider-Man is very against Spider-Man. You got the Daily Bugle show with J. Jonah Jameson is really going after Spider-Man hard. His girlfriend MJ and his best friend Ned are having a difficult time. They can't get into college because of their connections with Peter, and so the public outlook on Peter is very, very bad. And so Peter goes to Doctor Strange and he's like, hey, Doctor Strange, I need a spell that will erase that. Well, he asked him to go back in time and fix it, and Doctor Strange is like, even if I wanted to, I don't have the time stone anymore. Tells him about a spell that causes everybody to kind of forget everything, and he's going to perform it. And as he's performing it, Doctor Strange lets slip that everyone will forget who Peter Parker is. And Peter Parker's like, even MJ? And he's like, yeah, everybody, even me. Doctor Strange won't even know who he is anymore. And so Peter starts naming people that he needs to remember. And as he's doing this, Doctor Strange keeps having to make changes to the spell, mid-casting, and it causes a problem. And that's where we get what we saw in the trailer, which is where people from the old movies start to come through, including Doc Ock and Green Goblin. Now that's what you know about. I will say, before I go much further, Doctor Strange in this movie is almost a little too... I feel like we haven't seen Doctor Strange in long enough, because we don't have a good feel for his personality. It's almost as though he almost has a human disconnection. He's very practical in this movie. A lot of things he says come off as very harsh and almost wrong. Some of the things he says, you hear him and you're like, that's not what a good guy, that's not what a superhero should say. But Doctor Strange comes at everything from a different point of view, and I think that's something that everyone who watches this movie needs to understand. Doctor Strange has more than just your friendly neighborhood to worry about. Peter Parker, his life is very personal, and he has all these people that he cares about, and he wants to make sure that they're safe, but also protect his small portion of the world. Whereas Doctor Strange has to contend with universal threats, multiversal threats, and things like that. And so he sees a bigger picture. And so sometimes Spider-Man will be like, but what about this individual? They're not going to be okay. And Doctor Strange will just very coldly be like, they don't matter in the grand scheme of things. I'm sorry if they die. I'm sorry if something bad happens to them. But in the grand scheme of things, if we go tampering with this stuff, much worse outcomes can happen. And so at times, I feel like Doctor Strange comes off as very cold, but I think it's very true to his character, and I think they did a good job capturing that. I just wish we had seen Doctor Strange just a little bit more, so that people could have a better idea about his personality. I think some people will watch this and come off with the wrong impression that Doctor Strange is cold and uncaring, or that he's almost borderline a bad person, which I don't think is the case at all. Moving forward, Peter realizes that he can just go talk to the college. Like, instead of like trying to change the memory of everyone, so essentially the spell doesn't work, and instead of trying to change everyone's memories in the entire world, he could just go talk to the college and like plead his case. He didn't even think about doing that. He thought like, oh, I got the rejection letter, so everything's final. You know, me and MJ and Ed, we're not going to get into MIT. But Doctor Strange is like, no, just go talk to him. It should be fine. And so he goes and he follows one of the people. I can't remember what her position is, but she works for MIT, and she's on her way to an airport, and Peter Parker finds her like on a bridge on her drive and starts to talk to her, and that's when Doc Ock shows up. He starts attacking Spider-Man thinking that he's Tobey Maguire, Peter Parker. And so he begins to attack him. Of course, Peter doesn't know what's going on. He's never seen this guy in his life. And let me just say, Doc Ock is awesome. So cool to see him again. The intensity and the ferocity that he attacks with those arms of his is something. I haven't gone back and watched that second Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire in a long time. And so seeing that again really reminded me like how cool he was. And I loved watching him work with those arms. There's one point where he ends up on the underside of the bridge, and he's got two arms carrying him, and he's just, he's just moving through there with those arms just above him, and it's just so cool. He's still got two arms to fight Spider-Man with. I thought it was a really cool. I thought it was a really cool scene, and seeing him back in action was so awesome. And so much of this movie does that. This is the big bummer to me. You'll never be able to explain to future generations how incredible this movie, this moment was. Tobey Maguire is the Spider-Man that I grew up on. Green Goblin, Willem Dafoe, and Alfred Molina, these guys were the villains that I grew up on. This was before the Avengers. This was before you had so many superhero movies all the time. This Spider-Man really gave us, this Tobey Maguire Spider-Man really gave us so much of what we have because of the success of those movies. A lot of comic book superhero movies they owe a lot to this Spider-Man and this group of villains. The director, Sam Raimi, those writers, everything came together so well when those movies came out. And to see those come back now and become a small part of what has become such a massive universe in the MCU. I don't like everything that the MCU is doing now, and I'm disconnected from a lot of it after Infinity War, after Endgame, but there's still things that I want to see, still things that get me excited from time to time, and this is one of them. And it was just so cool. Spider-Man ends up defeating and capturing Doc Ock, and then is given a mission by Doctor Strange to round up any other multiverse visitors that may have accidentally crossed over. And so he goes and he finds, I think the next one that he finds is Electro, Jamie Foxx. And as he's fighting Electro, he's getting his butt kicked. And he's about to just get completely obliterated. And Sandman from the third Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie shows up and saves him. And he's like, Peter, what's going on? Where am I? None of these guys know where they are. They don't know where they are, and they think that this Spider-Man that they're talking to is their Spider-Man. They think that they're still on their planet Earth, and they're not, and they're like figuring all this out. Sandman is a really cool character in this movie. He comes in helping Peter Parker, and then as he realizes what's going on, because Sandman and Tobey Maguire ended on a good note. He comes in trying to help and like figure out what's going on, but as it goes, he just wants to get home to his daughter more and more, and so he slowly becomes a little more corrupted, almost the exact opposite of what happened to him in the third Spider-Man movie, where he went from fighting against Spider-Man to kind of helping him by the end. The reverse, he doesn't really help him at the end. They come to like a mutual understanding. The kind of reverse happens here, where the further it goes, the more frustrated he becomes, and he just wants to get home to his daughter, and so he starts fighting against Spider-Man. And so I thought he had a really cool character arc. I think Doc Ock's character arc is insanely good, where he starts off as this just psycho who is just, the voices in his head, and he's just there to kill anybody in his path. And then they fix him with the microchip, and he becomes sort of a good guy a little bit. He helps out a little bit at the end. And so to see those two kind of swap roles just a little bit, I thought was really interesting and really well done. The acting, let me just go ahead and say this now. The acting throughout the movie is phenomenal. The writing for this movie is brilliant. Everything is done super well. I'm not done talking about the characters. Electro is just power hungry and almost lets go of that power craving until another character influences him back over to the evil. I feel like I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. As Spider-Man is capturing all these villains, he runs into Green Goblin. Willem Dafoe in this movie gives an amazing performance. Just an absolutely dynamic performance. He comes in as Green Goblin, and then you see him in the alley, and he's got his mask hanging up, which is something that happened in the first movie. And he's talking. Okay, sorry, I was having a bad lighting issue with the window behind me. But anyway, so Green Goblin, he's having like internal dialogue like he often does, and he gets to arguing with himself, and they frame Green Goblin as such a schizophrenic in this movie. He has this complete split personality in this movie, which is something that we saw a lot of in that first movie. And he breaks his Green Goblin mask, and he goes to Aunt May for help, and he's like, I need to see Spider-Man. I think he's the only one that can help me. And so when Peter shows up to capture Green Goblin, as he's been capturing Electro, and he ends up having to capture Sandman, and they capture the Lizard from The Amazing Spider-Man. They captured all these characters, and he goes to capture the Green Goblin, and the Green Goblin is asking for help. He's like, look, I know something's wrong with me, but I don't wanna do this. I don't wanna be a problem, And so Spider-Man starts to feel like, I could help these people, They all had some sort of accident in their life, or some sort of something that happened to them that changed who they were. They weren't bad people before. And him and Doctor Strange kind of get into it over this. They have a little bit of a fight, because Doctor Strange is like, no, we got to put them back in their universe. And Spider-Man's like, well, if we put them back in their universe, they're going to die. And Doctor Strange is just, that doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. We got to do what's right. We got to put them back. And so Spider-Man ends up in a fight with Doctor Strange that basically ends up with him being trapped in his own mirror dimension for a little bit. Spider-Man escapes the mirror dimension and kind of traps Doctor Strange there temporarily. And then we get into the meat potatoes of the film, which is Spider-Man trying to fix all these supervillains. And they build a chip that can help fix Doc Ock. And so they get him a new chip to go in. And once Doc Ock's fixed, he's like, oh, I can help with the science. I can help fix all these other guys. They're using Stark Tech, and they're building engineering ways to fix everyone. Norman Osborn is right there at the center of it, helping create all these scientific advancements while he's suppressing this psychotic side of himself. And they fix Doc Ock, and they're working on fixing Electro, and the switch is flipped, and Green Goblin reemerges. Norman Osborn is taken away, and Green Goblin is back. Spider-Man kind of has a spider sense moment. He realizes that something is just off. What comes next is one of the greatest fight scenes, probably one of the greatest fight scenes I've seen in a Marvel movie. Just a 1v1 fight scene since Captain America fought Bucky Barnes in The Winter Soldier. It is so good. So chaos ensues. Electro escapes. Doc Ock gets knocked out a window and has to kind of flee. The Lizard gets away. Everyone kind of disperses except for the Green Goblin and Spider-Man, and they end up in a fight that is just, it's so good. Oh my gosh. The way that, I forgot how, and it's so reminiscent. In that first movie, when Green Goblin faced off against Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, he really beat the crap out of Spider-Man in that first movie. Go back and watch the power that Green Goblin has. And we've not really seen that happen to this Spider-Man. I don't think, not to this level. And Green Goblin just manhandles him. It's a great fight, back and forth, but there's this point, because Green Goblin doesn't have his mask, it's just Willem Dafoe's face in like the Green Goblin armor and this little brown shawl. Kind of reminiscent to when Spider-Man was in the burning building in the first movie, and he pretends to be the old woman. Sort of reminiscent of that. He has this brown shawl, and I know it's a callback to the comics because it's more of a comic book looking Green Goblin, because a lot of times he had like this scarf thing. And anyway, so they have this fight, and there's this moment where Spider-Man ends up on top of him, and he's just hitting Norman Osborn, and it reminded me a little bit of the Joker, but it was even more sadistic. As Spider-Man is hitting Norman Osborn in the face, with every punch, this smile just gets bigger and bigger, and this laugh gets more and more maniacal, and it is literally chilling. It had strong horror movie vibes. Like, it was so awesome. And after that moment, Green Goblin takes control of the fight and just dominates Peter Parker. It throws him through multiple floors of this massive tower, this massive building. And it is something else. I couldn't believe it. It was one of the most astounding things that I've seen in a minute. And then he kills Aunt May. And I didn't see it coming. I did not think that they would kill Aunt May. Now, in retrospect, knowing where the movie ended, it made sense. It had to happen because of everything that's going on. But what a moment. I mean, they did such a good job turning the Green Goblin into this arch nemesis, this evil, this person that you hated. You could feel Peter Parker's hatred for this villain, and it was amazing. The writing, the acting, everything came together for this heartbreaking scene, and it was something else. I do want to backtrack for just a split second. There's something I failed to mention. A couple little things that I noticed in this movie. Number one, there's multiple scenes where Doc Ock is trying to get his tentacles to listen to him, and he's repeatedly telling them, listen to me, which is a good callback to when he gained control in the second movie. That great scene, listen to me now, when he finally gains control over them. So there's a lot of callbacks to that. One of the most amazing moments in this movie is the split-second appearance by Charlie Cox's Daredevil. I had no idea, but such a nice moment for Marvel to say, hey, we haven't forgotten about these characters, and to give folks hope that maybe we'll see Daredevil on screen again soon. Maybe we'll see The Punisher on screen again soon, because I loved those two Netflix series. I know that Jessica Jones and Luke Cage had a big following as well. Both cool characters in their own right. I don't think Iron Fist has a lot of hope for coming back. He didn't have the best reception, but I would say that Daredevil and Punisher probably have the best opportunity, followed quickly by Luke Cage and then Jessica Jones for making a comeback. And just the fact that they nodded and had him in there as his character Daredevil. There's even a part where someone throws a brick through Aunt May's window and Peter goes to catch it, and before he can catch it, Daredevil snags it. Just like, obviously not looking because he's, blind, but he just does this no-look grab, and Peter's like, how did you do that? Daredevil says, I'm a really good lawyer. And that's it. That's all you get from him, really, in this movie. But it was just such a nice and incredible moment. Really floored me to even see him there. I did not see that coming, and that was super awesome. The movie, going back to where we were, reaches its low point where Peter has lost Aunt May, and it just literally, man, with the death of Tony Stark and everything that this character has gone through, it just, your heart goes out for him. I mean, it's just a movie, but man, your heart, you just cannot help but just feel sorry because he's just a kid, And having said that, I will say Tom Holland is now, I would say for the first time, starting to look like he he can't play a high schooler anymore. He looks like he's in his, like 23, 24 years old in the face and everything now. It's starting to get less believable that he's still a high schooler, so it's smart to kind of move him into the college age. But hey, still, you just completely, you got to feel for this kid. And so you cut to Ned, who has learned to use Doctor Strange's teleporter. And he's talking to MJ. They can't find Peter. And so Ned's like, I wish I could find Peter Parker, and starts to make a portal. And you see Spider-Man in an alley. And he runs toward the portal and he jumps through on screen. And then he takes the mask off and it's Andrew Garfield. And man, the theater erupted. It just erupted. As soon as Andrew Garfield was on screen, I don't know what he said, because people were clapping and hollering. And he explains that he's been here this whole time, and he's been trying to find Spider-Man. He's trying to find Peter Parker so that they can work together, and that maybe they can all help each other figure out how to fix all this. They talk for a little while. It's a great moment. They really give Andrew Garfield several good moments that I think he really needed. His Spider-Man is probably the least liked Spider-Man. And I don't think it's Andrew Garfield's fault. I don't think his movies were particularly the best, but I think he does a good job playing Spider-Man. I don't think Andrew Garfield always makes the best Peter Parker, but I think he makes a really good Spider-Man in the suit. I feel like it must have been such a cathartic moment for him. His movies were kind of cut short. The second one was not received well at all, and I've seen some behind the scenes stuff saying that, he has a lot of regrets about the movies, and that, that he's had bad interactions with fans and stuff like that at times. And so to know that he had this moment where not only did he get to reprise this role, not only did he get to do that, but also everyone was happy to see him. He's my least favorite Spider-Man. I don't mind saying it. Seeing him show up, especially in that moment, was huge. And it was so good for him. It was so good for his character. It was so good for the film. It was really masterfully done. And I thought it was amazing. He has some great moments, some great heartfelt moments. They try to find their Peter one more time. They find another Peter Parker who's not in a Spider-Man uniform, and it's Tobey Maguire who walks through the portal. And now he's talking to Andrew Garfield, and they have that moment, like the meme where they kind of point at each other. They kind of web at each other a little bit, just to kind of, I guess they're feeling each other out. They don't really trust each other right off the jump. And there's this really cool moment where Tobey Maguire webs Andrew Garfield's web shooter, so he can't shoot web anymore. And there's a whole bit later on when all three Spider-Man meet and they're working together, where Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland are completely blown away that Tobey Maguire has organic web, and they ask him questions. It's a really funny moment. It's a really great moment. They take the two Spider-Men, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, give Ned and MJ some insight into what it's like to be Spider-Man. They give them some information, and through talking to those two, they all kind of figure out where he might be. And so they find him. And there's this beautiful moment where MJ and Ned are there for Peter, and then the other two Peter Parkers show up, and they have this conversation. And, Tom Holland is just in so much pain, and he's just ready to quit being Spider-Man. And Andrew Garfield talks about losing Gwen Stacy. Tobey Maguire talks about losing Uncle Ben, and how they both had, all this rage and anger from it, and how it changed them. And, and then there's moments where they talk about who they became after the movies, and how they stayed motivated and continued to be Spider-Man afterward, and how they got through everything. And they kind of helped Tom Holland through this moment. And it's so good. It's so amazing. You get this next scene where they all decide to work together to try to cure all these villains, and they're in this laboratory space, and they're working on different cures for the Green Goblin and all these other people. Tom Holland doesn't really want to cure Green Goblin. He really wants to kill him. But the other Peters are adamant, no, you need to try to save him. But there's so many great moments where you can tell all of the Spider-Men are talking about things that happened in their movies and what it was like for their characters, but you can see where it bleeds over a little bit. And the actors are talking about a little bit what it was like to play Spider-Man, what it was like to be Spider-Man. Not it's more than just Peter Parker. It's also the actors, and they're all having these really cathartic moments where they can kind of talk about what it meant to them. And you know it's from their Peter Parker point of view, which is all well and good, but the parallels that they had outside of the movies to who they were in real life are undeniable. And you can see that kind of bleed through, and it's such an amazing thing. And I know I keep saying that, but I just, it was really something else to see. And that's what I was talking about earlier with it. Like, you'll never be able to explain to younger generations if you grew up with Tobey Maguire and you saw the Andrew Garfield and then you got Tom Holland, and then to see them all on screen again for this moment where they just come together and they work together, it's astounding. It's really something else. And so, of course, you've got the big scene at the end where they're fighting all these villains. It's a 3-on-3. It's Sandman and Electro and the Lizard. And they have this 3-on-3 fight, and the Spider-Men are having a hard time working together. And then Tom Holland finally gets his moment where he gets to be the mentor a little bit. And he says to the other guys, you know, they're like, we've never worked on a team before. We don't know how to do it. And Tom Holland's like, well, I've worked on a team. He talks about the Avengers a little bit. There's some funny moments there. He kind of coaches them through it. And then they start working together a lot better. There's some really awesome, like, Cirque du Soleil, using each other's web to, like, catapult the other kind of moments. Really acrobatic stuff. It looks great. There's some great banter. You get great Spider-Man banter from all three of them as they're fighting and talking to these villains that they know and that they faced before. And so, like, there's a lot of great moments. Eventually, Green Goblin shows back up, and he kind of blows everything up. Right as they kind of wrap up the fight against Electro and Sandman and the Lizard, Green Goblin shows up and he blows up. They're fighting on the Statue of Liberty, and the Statue of Liberty is having a Captain America shield built onto it. So there's all this, it's like a construction site. Green Goblin blows part of that up, and Mary Jane begins to fall. Tom Holland goes after her, but Green Goblin hits him and takes him off. So Mary Jane's falling, and you have this amazing moment that I just loved where Andrew Garfield dives after her, and it's just like the scene where he lost Gwen Stacy, but he does it differently this time, and he's able to save MJ, and it's just, oh my gosh, what a moment. And then, like, he begins to cry immediately as he's asking her if she's okay, and she's like, yeah, I'm okay. Andrew Garfield, bravo. It was really good. I think more than anybody, Andrew Garfield and his Peter Parker, his Spider-Man, and the actor himself, Andrew Garfield, got more redemption out of this movie than anybody, and I thought it was so stinking good to see, y'all. It was so stinking good to see the redemption for that Spider-Man, for that Peter Parker, and also for Andrew Garfield. And I want to see him again. I don't think it'll happen, and it may never happen. This may be the only little nugget that we ever get of seeing these three Spider-Men on screen again. You may never see another Tobey Maguire. You may never see another Andrew Garfield. I want to see them on screen again. Every one of them individually, together, I don't care. It was so good to see. And so that moment happened, and then Tom Holland faces off with Green Goblin. Oh yeah, there was a moment where Doc Ock came back, and he kind of saved them all for a minute. He has a moment where he kind of fights Green Goblin, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see Doc Ock versus Green Goblin for just a moment, and then that fight kind of ends. But you have your climax there with Tom Holland facing off against Green Goblin, and he finally gets the better of him, and he's just beating him relentlessly there at the end, and he picks up the glider, and he's going to stab him. And right as he's about to kill him, Tobey Maguire jumps in the way, catches the glider, and he's like, he just gives him this look. There's no dialogue, which I think is brilliant. I think it's brilliant that they decided to go with no dialogue here. He just gives him this look as he's holding this thing. What I think is great is Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man was so strong, like just from a strength basis. I think he's shown in his movies more strength-based feats than Tom Holland's has. I think Tom Holland's has relied on tech and acrobatics a little bit more. So to see Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man holding back this glider and then eventually even get brought down to a knee by Tom Holland's Spider-Man's strength shows how invested his Spider-Man was in this moment, how much he wanted to kill him, that even though I would say that Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man is stronger, it still took everything he had to stop Tom Holland from killing the Green Goblin. I thought that was a great moment. And then right as Tom Holland relinquishes and lets go, from behind, Tobey Maguire gets stabbed by the Green Goblin. And I thought, they're going to kill him. I thought he's going to die. There's a quick moment. Andrew Garfield throws Tom Holland the syringe that will undo Green Goblin, that will undo the thing that he had happen to him in the first movie. Tom Holland gets him, and there's this beautiful moment where William Dafoe goes from Green Goblin back to Norman Osborn, and he sees Tobey Maguire there on the ground bleeding, and he's just like, what have I done? Which is, again, just so reminiscent of that first movie and how he would go back and forth from remorseful Norman Osborn to just completely psychotic and deranged Green Goblin. It was amazing. His performance, Willem Dafoe's performance in this movie was out of this world. It was great. It was great. Tobey Maguire doesn't die. Doctor Strange shows back up and starts to set everything right, but the world is ripping apart. And you can see like images in the clouds of other characters that are starting to bleed through into the Marvel Universe. And Doctor Strange is like, oh, look, I can't stop them. Tom Holland says, well, what if everyone just forgot? What if everyone forgot I was Spider-Man? Would it set everything back? And Doctor Strange is like, yeah, it would. And so he starts the spell, and everyone has to forget. MJ, Ned, Doctor Strange, the Avengers, anybody who knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, the entire world really, will have to forget. And it closes the rift. You have a beautiful moment where Peter talks to MJ and Ned, and he lets them know what's going to happen. You know, Zendaya and Tom Holland have an amazing moment on screen where they're essentially saying goodbye, but trying not to really say goodbye, hoping that they'll find a way to make it work, you know, after she forgets. The movie ends on a very melancholy kind of note where Spider-Man walks in, Tom Holland walks into a little cafe where Zendaya has been working, where MJ's been working, and he has this prepared little speech to tell her who he is, and she's happy, and she's talking to Ned. They're still friends, and he's about to tell her, and he sees a Band-Aid on her head where she got hurt during the fight. And there's this beautiful another beautiful bit of unspoken dialogue where he realizes that if he tells her, he brings her back into this dangerous world. And so he walks away. I think he'll still plan on being in her life as Peter Parker, but I don't think he'll tell her that he's Spider-Man. And maybe someday down the road she'll figure it out again. I'm sure she will. She figured it out for herself the first time. It was a good moment, man. And it all made sense. The writing all made sense. He walks away, and the world has forgotten about Spider-Man. Or at least about Peter Parker. They know about Spider-Man, but they don't know about Peter Parker. And Peter Parker gets this, the last time you see him, he gets this little, the last time you see Peter Parker, he gets this little dumpy little apartment in New York. It looks a lot like Tobey Maguire's apartment in the third Spider-Man, that little apartment that him and MJ have. And the last thing he does is he picks up the Spider-Man mask, and he makes himself a new suit. It's very, very shiny, very blue. And he gets back out there. And so it's a really, really good ending. And I understand why they had to go this route, because Tom Holland's future as Spider-Man is unsure. Marvel's future with Spider-Man and Sony is unsure. And so it's either a beautiful ending or hopefully not the last time that we see this Spider-Man. I don't know, man. Honestly, I've talked and talked and talked, and there's probably so much more that I wanted to talk about. Easter eggs and little references and things all throughout this movie that were just so, so good. But I don't want to keep you any longer. This has been a very long video as it is. Let me just say that, man, I felt like a kid. I felt like a kid watching this movie. I was excited. I wanted to cheer. I wanted to jump at times, man. There was so much like wish fulfillment in this film. The only experiences I can even relate it to were some of those early like Avengers movies. Like the first time you saw the Avengers together, maybe that first Infinity War, I know that movie had like a lot of sadness in it too, but I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't want to say that this was my favorite superhero movie of all time, but I would definitely need to watch this one again and reevaluate because it's up there. I loved this movie, and I thought top to bottom, from start to finish, it was a ride. It had the comedy, it had heart, it had beautiful moments, there were cathartic moments, there was returning characters that we didn't think we'd ever see again, and seeing them in roles that made sense for where their characters were after their movies, and they did it all well. No character had a disservice done to them, I didn't think. And so that's where I'm at. Having said all of these things and keeping you here for way too long, I'm giving Spider-Man No Way Home a 99 overall, and it's well deserved. All right, thank you for stopping by. Thank you for listening if you managed to stay for this whole thing. I don't like to do movie reviews that are super long, but this one just needed talking about. There was so much I wanted to cover and so much I've still missed. I don't know. Let me know in the comments below if you've seen Spider-Man, what you thought about it. Let me know if I'm just overly attached to some of these characters or if you guys kind of felt the same way where you were just kind of a kid again for just a moment, taken back to those early Spider-Man days. Let me know how you guys felt about it. Tell me down in the comments below. I don't know that there's anything here you could get mad over, but in case you are upset about anything, don't get mad, don't get upset. It's just one man's opinion. Thanks.